connect ships, treasure, eye patches and rum? A good old pirate. I'm sure you're thinking about these guys, the Pirates of the Caribbean, Jack Sparrow, Blackbeard, Davy Jones, you know the rest. It's one of the biggest franchises ever. 5 movies and around $5 billion at the box office. Some nice fictional pirate drama. Or is it? Jack Sparrow may not be real, Davy Jones certainly isn't, but the Pirates of the Caribbean are very real. In the 17th century, they terrorized Spanish ships in the region. Some of them became legends. They sailed, looted, and who knows, maybe had eye patches. But how did these pirates come to be? And why the Caribbean? Time for a flashback. The year is 1492. A clueless explorer has just landed in the Bahamas. He thinks he's found India. That explorer was Christopher Columbus. He found a way to sail from Europe to America. Once there, he did not waste time. He claimed the land for Spain, set up a colony, captured some of the inhabitants, and returned home. Classic Western hero. What Columbus found led to a chain reaction. Spain soon colonized the Americas. And what did they find there? Riches beyond their imagination, gold, silver, gems, tobacco, all of it free to plunder. Spain did exactly that. They carried American wealth back to Europe and they used these ships, galleons. You've probably seen them in the movies. Multiple decks, very tall sails, and lots of room to store the loot. By the 17th century, these galleons were operating regularly. Soon they became targets. The first raids were done by Buccaneers. These were European outcasts living in the Caribbean, like escaped servants or former soldiers. They were British, French, and Dutch. But what united them was hatred for the Spanish. Spain tried to capture and kill these buccaneers. After all, they were living outside the law. So they had motive to attack Spanish galleons. What they needed was the means. And this is where other European powers entered the picture, the likes of Britain and France. They looked at Spain and they were jealous. How could one country take all the riches? So what did they do? They decided to fund the buccaneers. So when piracy started, it was actually legal. It was celebrated. Let me introduce you to Henry Morgan, or rather, Sir Henry Morgan. He was a buccaneer from Wales. He plundered Spanish galleons with the blessings of Britain. Soon he transitioned from ships to land. Morgan and his men captured Cuba and Panama from Spain. His reward? A knighthood from King Charles II. Not a bad gig, I guess. People are divided on what to call men like Morgan. Pirate has a negative ring to it, so he's sometimes called a privateer. But what's the difference? A pirate is an outlaw. They don't pick and choose their targets. All ships are fair game, but privateers work for a government, like Henry Morgan for Britain. It's not really a big difference though. If you ask Spanish sailors in the 17th century, their answer would be clear. Morgan was a pirate. But what about the others? Why did young European men turn to piracy? The answer lies in the economic climate. We're talking about the 16th and 17th centuries, really tough times. The cities were packed with people, jobs were few, and poverty was a way of life. So young men were tempted by piracy. It probably seemed like an easy way out. A lot of sailors also made the switch. They went from being naval workers to pirates. And what was their excuse? Well, life on ships was tough, and European officers were a nightmare to handle. Being a pirate was much easier. No need to live by the rules, you get to make your own. One such pirate was Edward Teach. Does the name ring a bell? Well, it should, because Edward Teach appears in the Pirates of the Caribbean. His alias is more famous though, Blackbeard. In 1717, he went rogue. Blackbeard captured a French trading vessel and turned it into a warship. He had 40 guns installed. He called it Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard is arguably the most famous pirate. People were terrified of him, and that fear was part of his strategy. He would grow his beard long and light fuses around it before battle. Imagine that picture from a ship. Most sailors did not even try to fight, they simply surrendered. This looting continued for around 80 years, 80. It is called the Golden Age of Piracy. There was no control anymore. The Buccaneers did what they wanted, French and British ships were targeted, but even these lawless pirates had a code. Yes, the pirate code is actually real. The first one was written by this man. Bartholomew Roberts, aka Black Bart. Look at some of his rules. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment. Every man has equal right to seize provisions and liquor. In other words, democracy and equality. Doesn't mean the world of piracy was some wonderland, but it certainly attracted young men of the time, even women. Some of the most famous Caribbean pirates were women, like Bonny and Mary Read. For all these pirates, the Caribbean was the perfect hunting ground. Lots of small islands to hide in, also lots of bustling ports. The biggest was Port Royal in Jamaica. Think Las Vegas on steroids. 1 out of 4 buildings there were either bars or brothels. Gives you an idea what went on. But Port Royal did not survive for long. In the late 17th century, disaster struck, an earthquake followed by a tsunami. Port Royal sank below the ocean. Perhaps it was a sign of things to come. By this time, the 18th century, Spain had lost ground. Britain was the new big power, so their attitude towards piracy changed. It was great when Spanish ships were being attacked, but now the pirates were looting the British, so something had to be done. And that something was a crackdown. In 1670, Britain had just 2 ships in the Caribbean. By 1718, they had 124 ships. These were used to hunt down pirates. Once captured, there was no trial. It was quick and summary justice. Remember Blackbeard? He faced a similar fate. He was decapitated and his head was fixed on a ship. Around 400 to 600 pirates were executed by the Navy. The rest surrendered. In 1717, King George issued an act of grace, basically a king's pardon. All pirates were forgiven for their crimes. All they had to do was surrender by the end of the year. Most of them did. I know all of this may sound like a fantasy, a world of adventure and adrenaline. But there was also a dark side to this. Pirates could be brutal. Crew members were often whipped, beaten, and disemboweled. Captured women were often raped. So the Pirates' Code wasn't the only reality of that time. If piracy was liberating, it was also bloody and violent.